Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The sun barely filtered through the large windows of the New Haven courthouse, casting golden rays onto the polished wooden benches. The atmosphere, usually austere, was thick with palpable tension. Today, the case to be heard seemed trivial to many, but for some, it would become a test of competence, patience, and prejudice. Judge Cynthia Harper entered the courtroom, dressed in her impeccably pressed black robe. Her step was sure and measured, and her gaze swept the assembly with a natural authority. Harper was known for her formidable intelligence, but also for her arrogance. She had never tolerated anyone daring to challenge her or question her judgment. Today, her attention was drawn to a young man seated at the defense table. Malik Jefferson, 22, black, dressed in a simple dark suit, calmly flipped through his documents. He breathed steadily, his hands trembling slightly, but his gaze betrayed no fear. To Harper, he represented the archetype of the ambitious student, overconfident, too young to grasp the intricacies of the courtroom. She gave a sardonic smile, already anticipating the scene she was about to play, humiliating this young man and reminding everyone who held the power in this room. The murmurs of the lawyers and journalists present mingled with the soft sounds of turning pages and the click of heels on the floor. Malik, unaware of the judge's intention, stepped forward confidently when invited to present his defense. His voice, clear and measured, resonated in the courtroom, and yet Harper couldn't help but chuckle to himself. "Do you really think you can convince me with your arguments, young man?" she snapped, her voice tinged with condescension. The stifled laughter of the spectators, mingled with the surprise of some of the lawyers, reinforced the judge's arrogance. But Malik did not waver. He responded with impeccable courtesy, dodging the mockery as if he already knew that talent alone can sometimes command respect where fear fails. What Harper didn't yet know was that this young man wasn't just a brilliant student, but a legal prodigy. The decisions he would pronounce, the legal references he would mobilize, and the clarity of his reasoning would shake the entire court and, above all, shake Judge Harper's pride. Malik's apparent calm was deceptive. Behind his dark, focused eyes lay a mind of rare acuity, capable of transforming arrogance into a lesson and humiliation into triumph. Today, the confrontation was not merely a legal matter, it was the beginning of a lesson in humility and admiration that would forever mark the New Haven courtroom. The bell rang in the great courtroom, announcing the start of the hearing. The lawyers straightened up, pens glided across paper, and all eyes turned to Judge Cynthia Harper, who settled into her seat with the assurance of someone who believes she holds the whole world in her hands. Harper scanned the files laid out before her, her fingers nervously tapping the polished wood. Then her gaze settled on Malik Jefferson, seated at the defense table. He looked calm, almost too calm, for a young man about to appear before a full courtroom. His suit, simple but perfectly tailored, contrasted sharply with the ostentation of some of the lawyers who had appeared in expensive and flashy attire. "Young man, you are here to defend your client against serious charges." "I hope you are ready," Harper said, his icy voice filling the room. His words were chosen to intimidate, to remind Malik that he was still just a student facing an established figure in the legal profession. Malik raised his gaze slightly, his dark eyes fixing on the judge with calm intensity. "I am ready, Your Honor," he replied, his voice clear and steady, devoid of any hesitation. The courtroom immediately sensed a difference in his tone, he spoke with the certainty of someone who knows his strength. Harper gave a wry smile. She had never encountered anyone who showed no signs of nervousness in her presence. "Very well, young man, I'm listening. But don't forget that experience counts as much as courage." Malik began to present his argument. He referred to contractual clauses, explained the legal obligations of the parties, and cited precedents that few lawyers remembered. His sentences were precise, each word carefully chosen, each idea developed with impeccable logic. Harper, initially amused, felt her smile freeze. He wasn't just a well-prepared young man, he was someone who understood the law on a level she hadn't anticipated. The mockery she had expected slowly transformed into quiet vigilance. She briefly interrupted Malik to test his answers, but he responded with a clarity and speed that deeply surprised her. The lawyers around them began exchanging astonished glances. Even some of the most experienced seemed impressed by Malik's mastery. Harper spoke again, attempting to regain control. "Do you really think these references are relevant?" she asked, her tone charged with a mixture of defiance and condescension. Malik responded calmly, explaining why each of his quotations supported his argument and demonstrating the logic with surgical precision. The entire room fell silent. Judge Harper realized, with a mixture of surprise and concern, that this young man was no ordinary student. For the first time in a long time, Harper felt a slight unease. The arrogance she had always used as a shield against the unexpected was crumbling before Malik Jefferson's quiet composure. What she had thought was a simple exercise in intimidation was about to become an unexpected challenge to her own ego. The young man had not yet finished. But already, his presence was transforming the courtroom, appending expectations, and announcing that the confrontation that had just begun would mark all those present, and especially Judge Harper, forever. The brief pause allowed murmurs to circulate in the courtroom. Some lawyers whispered amongst themselves, impressed by the precision of Malik's references. Even a few jurors seemed intrigued by this young man who, despite his age, spoke with the quiet strength of a veteran lawyer. Judge Cynthia Harper closed her eyes for a moment behind her glasses, trying to regain her composure. She didn't like being surprised, much less challenged. Her condescending smile gradually transformed into an expression of intense concentration. She needed to regain control. When the hearing resumed, Harper asked what she thought was a trick question. "You claim that your client did not breach any contractual clauses, but how do you explain the omission in the document dated 2023? Her tone betrayed amusement mixed with defiance. Malik rose slowly, his dark eyes meeting the judge's with a confidence that was neither arrogant nor submissive. "Your Honor, this omission is precisely what I intend to demonstrate. It does not constitute a breach, but an incorrect interpretation of contractual obligations. Allow me to elaborate." He laid out his argument with relentless clarity, citing rarely invoked articles of law, decisions of superior courts, and even legal doctrines taught in advanced courses. Each sentence reinforced his argument, each example rendered it irrefutable. Harper felt a shiver of concern. She had interrupted many young lawyers and students throughout her career, but none had ever anticipated her questions with such precision. Even opposing counsel seemed speechless. To test his ability, Harper attempted a second trap, bringing up a complex legal precedent. Malik responded almost immediately, citing the exact case and explaining its application in the present context. The entire room held its breath at the young man's exceptional mastery. At the end of her presentation, an almost reverent silence fell over the courtroom. Harper, motionless, felt her ego falter. She had wanted to humiliate, to ridicule, but it was she who found herself destabilized. For the first time, she saw the courtroom not as a place of absolute power, but as an arena where truth and competence could subvert authority. The clerk, who was observing the scene from the side, murmured in a low voice, "I've never seen anything like it. He's brilliant." Harper didn't reply, but inside she knew she had just met an adversary who would force her to reconsider her own certainties. Malik, calm and methodical, sat down again, ready to defend each point with the same precision. He was not just an intelligent young man, he was a strategist, a master of his field, and today he was going to show that neither arrogance nor power is enough against competence and preparation. The hearing resumed after a short break, but the atmosphere had changed. The eyes of the jurors and lawyers were now fixed on Malik Jefferson with a mixture of curiosity and burgeoning respect. Even some members of the public, who had come to witness a routine trial, seemed fascinated by the young man's composure and precision. Judge Cynthia Harper, for her part, straightened in her seat, aware that her usual strategy of verbal dominance had no effect on Malik. She decided to raise the stakes. "Very well, young man, if you are so sure of your arguments, then explain to me how you interpret Clause 7.3 of the contract, which the opposing party is invoking to support its accusations." Malik nodded slightly and took a deep breath. Clause 7.3, Your Honor, stipulates that, he analyzed every word of the text, examined the signatory's intent, and explained how the plaintiff's actions in no way constituted a violation. Every sentence was clear, logical, and methodical. Harper frowned. She knew that clause by heart and thought she could turn it against him, but Malik anticipated her objections, addressing each point before she could even fully articulate it. His explanations were structured like a mathematical argument, precise, rigorous, and impossible to refute. The prosecutor, known for his experience and his ability to intimidate young lawyers, leaned slightly towards his colleague and murmured, "I've never seen anyone, at that age, wield the law like that." Harper felt her ego swell. She had underestimated Malik Jefferson. She had thought she could ridicule him, trip him up over his words, but instead she found herself facing an opponent who not only understood the law, but knew how to present it so that it became an irrefutable argument. For the first time, she felt trapped in her own courtroom. Her attempts at intimidation and her loaded questions had only revealed the extent of the young man's talent. Malik wasn't simply intelligent, he was strategic, methodical, and surprisingly confident, but never arrogant. At that moment, Harper understood that this trial would not be just a legal matter. It was a test of her own ability to recognize genius when she encountered it, to put aside her pride and to accept that sometimes, experience is not enough when faced with an exceptional mind. Undeterred by the judge's thoughts and heavy silence, Malik continued his presentation. His words were precise, his reasoning impeccable, and his mastery of the law resonated throughout the courtroom. Even Harper felt a shiver. This young man she had sought to humiliate had just transformed the courtroom into a stage where only talent and logic mattered. That day, the challenge wasn't just about the trial's verdict. It was about Harper herself, her ego, and how she would now view any young lawyer or prodigy who entered her courtroom. Malik Jefferson had just laid the groundwork for a lesson the judge would never forget: underestimating someone can cost far more than one might imagine. The hearing progressed, and every word spoken by Malik Jefferson resonated through the courtroom with unexpected force. Judge Cynthia Harper was no longer merely attentive, she was on her guard. She had always believed that her experience and authority were enough to dominate the room, but Malik was forcing her to reevaluate every prejudice she held about youth, appearance, and ego. On several occasions, Harper tried to unsettle him with complex questions and archaic legal references, hoping to catch him off guard. But Malik anticipated his every move. His answers were not only accurate but presented with a calm and logical precision that commanded admiration. Every point he raised highlighted nuances that even seasoned lawyers might have overlooked. As he cited a rarely used 2017 Court of Appeal decision, Harper felt a shiver run through her. Her fingers drummed nervously on the wooden lectern. She realized she was facing a remarkably sharp mind. This young man, whom she had initially underestimated, had not only prepared his case but had thoroughly studied the relevant jurisprudence to anticipate every opposing strategy. During the break, she whispered to her clerk, her voice barely audible, He's more talented than I thought." The clerk, surprised by this rare confession from a judge known for her pride, nodded his head with a mixture of respect and surprise. Harper, alone for a moment, reflected on her initial attitude. She had wanted to humiliate Malik in front of everyone, to make fun of his youth and apparent inexperience. But every attempt at intimidation had failed. And now, she had to admit that she was facing a true legal prodigy, capable of transforming logic into a formidable weapon. When the hearing resumed, Harper felt a strange sensation, a mixture of defiance and respect, but also subtle humiliation. She could no longer simply see Malik as an arrogant young student. She now had to take his arguments seriously and acknowledge that her own vanity had almost deceived her. Malik, true to form, betrayed nothing of his inner satisfaction. Every word he uttered reinforced his position, without ever attacking Harper personally. His respect for the law and procedure was palpable, and paradoxically, it was this very composure that began to shake the judge's arrogance. That day, in the New Haven courtroom, a spark of respect ignited. Deep down, Harper knew this hearing would be unlike any other. Malik Jefferson wasn't simply brilliant, he had just reminded her, with almost silent humility, that talent and preparation always triumph over pride and pretension. The courtroom vibrated with a new tension. Judge Cynthia Harper felt her authority waver. What she had thought was a mere presumptuous student had turned out to be an exceptional legal strategist, capable of anticipating each of her attempts to destabilize him. Determined to regain control, Harper attempted one last provocative maneuver. She raised an eyebrow and said sharply, "Young man, you seem to have an answer for everything. Let's see if you can address this complex issue. How do you explain the conflicting interpretation of Clause 12.4 in the context of recent case law? I doubt your reading is up to scratch." Malik Jefferson stood up calmly, adjusted his jacket slightly, and replied in a composed voice. "Madam Justice, Clause 12.4 has been interpreted in different ways by several courts. However, considering the full text, the contractual context, and relevant precedents, the opposing party's interpretation is incorrect. Let me elaborate." And he began to unfold his argument, citing 3 court decisions, explaining the nuances and illustrating each point with concrete examples. Every sentence was precise, every demonstration irrefutable. The entire room listened, captivated. Harper felt her face harden. Every attempt at humiliation had failed. Malik not only knew the law, but he knew how to present it so that it became an unstoppable weapon. She realized she had made a mistake, trying to crush this young man with arrogance. Even the prosecutor opposite him bowed his head respectfully, impressed by the depth of Malik's knowledge and the clarity of his arguments. A few murmurs rippled through the room, and Harper knew that everyone had recognized the young man's intellectual superiority. Malik, with an almost disarming calm, concluded his argument. "Therefore, Madam Judge, taking into account all the relevant texts and precedents, it is clear that the opposing party's interpretation of Clause 12.4 cannot be accepted." A heavy silence followed. Harper blinked, aware for the first time that she had been outmaneuvered in her own court of law. Her arrogance had just met the precision and mastery of a legal genius. For Harper, it was a moment of revelation. She now had to recognize Malik's talent. The humiliation she had anticipated was backfiring, and the young man, seemingly without effort, had just transformed the courtroom into a stage where only merit mattered. That day, Harper's mistake marked a turning point. The confrontation intended to crush Malik transformed into a lesson in humility and admiration. Malik Jefferson was not just a student, he was a prodigy, and Judge Harper had just discovered this the hard way. The hearing was reaching its climax. Judge Cynthia Harper was now aware of a truth she had refused to see from the beginning. This young man she had wanted to humiliate was not only intelligent, he was a legal genius. As Malik Jefferson finished his final argument on Clause 12.4, Harper took a deep breath. Her fingers drummed nervously on the lectern. For the first time, she felt vulnerable in front of a lawyer. And not just any lawyer, a 22-year-old student. She sat up and asked in a more measured, almost incredulous voice. "Young man, where did you study?" Malik replied calmly. "To Yale, Your Honor." The name resonated in Harper's mind. Yale, the prestigious law program she'd heard about, renowned for producing prodigies. And Malik's face wasn't entirely unfamiliar. Rumors circulated about a brilliant student, capable of outshining even the most seasoned lawyers. A spark of understanding flashed through Harper. This young man, whom she had underestimated because of his age and appearance, was exactly the prodigy she had heard about. Shock was now mixed with admiration. She had wanted to humiliate him, but she found herself facing someone whose mastery of the law surpassed anything she had anticipated. The entire courtroom seemed to sense the change in atmosphere. The murmurs died away. Even the prosecutor, surprised by this revelation, couldn't suppress a slight gesture of respect. Harper, for her part, felt her pride waver. She had always believed that her experience was enough to dominate any courtroom, but Malik had just reminded her of a crucial lesson: talent and preparation often trump arrogance and experience alone. She took a deep breath and said, this time sincerely, "Young man, your skills are impressive. I bow before your mastery of the law." The entire courtroom witnessed this rare admission of respect from a judge known for her ego. Malik, true to form, inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the statement without arrogance. He knew that true triumph lay not only in legal victory, but in the ability to inspire respect, even in those who thought they underestimated you. This moment marked a turning point in the courtroom and in Harper's career. She had just realized that humility and recognition of talent, even in a young unknown, were sometimes more powerful than condescension. Malik Jefferson was not just a student, he was a force to be reckoned with in the legal profession, and Judge Harper had just learned that the hard way. The air in the courtroom was thick with a new, but different, tension. Judge Cynthia Harper was no longer trying to trap Malik Jefferson. On the contrary, she observed every gesture, every word, with a mixture of admiration and fascination. Harper had always believed that experience and authority were the keys to respect in a courtroom. That day, she realized she had been wrong. Competence, knowledge, and preparation could overcome ego and arrogance. Malik embodied exactly that, calm, methodical, perfectly prepared, and with an impressive grasp of the law. As he continued to explain his arguments regarding the validity of the contractual clauses and the relevant legal precedents, Harper felt her mind working at an accelerated pace. She analyzed her own decisions, her past reactions, and realized that she had been blinded by her initial prejudices. The young man was not only brilliant, he was a strategist, capable of anticipating every trap, every question, every attempt at intimidation. Harper, one of the most respected judges in New Haven, felt for the first time that strange mixture of respect mixed with humiliation. She had underestimated a 22-year-old student. When Malik concluded a particularly complex point on the interpretation of recent case law, Harper straightened up and spoke with rare honesty. "Young man, I must admit, your knowledge and reasoning are exceptional. You have transformed this court, and every argument you have presented is remarkably precise." The murmurs in the room testified to the effect of his words. Harper had just publicly acknowledged the genius of a young lawyer before an audience accustomed to hierarchy and established power. Malik inclined his head slightly, recognizing the respect, but without arrogance. He had gained something more precious than a mere legal victory, recognition of his pure talent. Harper, for her part, experienced an inner transformation. Her ego, long fueled by authority and experience, relaxed. She understood that her role was not only to judge, but also to learn, to observe, and sometimes, to admit that genius could come from the least expected places. The courtroom would never be the same for her again. This young man, whom she had wanted to humiliate, had just given her a lesson that no experience, no legal textbook, could have taught her. Malik Jefferson was not only a brilliant student, he was a legal force, a prodigy whose intellect and discipline surpassed anything she had ever imagined. The hearing was nearing its conclusion, and the atmosphere in the New Haven courtroom was charged with anticipation. Judge Cynthia Harper, now attentive and respectful, followed every word with a mixture of surprise and admiration for Malik Jefferson. The young man, after methodically presenting his arguments, rose for the last time. His voice, calm but determined, resonated throughout the room. "Madam Judge, taking into account all the contractual clauses, legal precedents, and the parties' intentions at the time of signing, it is clear that my client has not breached any legal obligation. The arguments put forward by the opposing party are based on erroneous interpretations and factual omissions." The court remained silent. Every word Malik spoke was like a perfectly hewn stone, building an edifice of logic and truth impossible to topple. Even the most experienced lawyers, known for their skill in manipulating the proceedings, found themselves unsettled. Harper took a deep breath. She knew that no objection or reply could change the clarity of Malik's arguments. The verdict seemed already sealed. When she struck the gavel to close the session, she uttered the words that marked the official recognition of the young man's talent. "The case is decided in favor of the defendant." The arguments presented were precise, logical, and irrefutable. A murmur of astonishment rippled through the room. Malik Jefferson, at 22 years old, had just won a resounding victory, demonstrating that preparation, talent, and mastery of the law always overcome arrogance and attempts at intimidation. Harper, seated in her chair, felt a mixture of humiliation and admiration. She had wanted to humiliate this young man, to ridicule him, but it was she who had just learned a lesson in humility. Her gaze, which had once condescendingly scrutinized every student, was now filled with respect. Even the opposing side, unable to dispute the facts, nodded their heads in respect. The entire room had witnessed something rare, the victory of a young genius against the arrogance of an established authority. Malik, without a word of ostentatious triumph, calmly gathered his files and bowed slightly before the judge. His attitude reflected exceptional maturity. He had won more than a trial, he had earned the recognition of those who had doubted him. On that day, the New Haven courtroom witnessed a historic moment. Malik Jefferson had transformed a confrontation that could have been humiliating into an intellectual triumph, proving that competence and talent can shake even the highest walls of arrogance. For Judge Harper, it was a revelation. Underestimating someone because of their age or appearance could be a costly mistake. And for Malik, this triumph was just the beginning of a journey where respect and mastery of the law would be his most powerful weapons. A few days after the trial, the New Haven courtroom returned to its usual rhythm. Yet, something had changed in the air. Judge Cynthia Harper, usually inflexible and imperturbable, could not forget Malik Jefferson's performance. His ability to analyze, anticipate, and present his arguments with exceptional clarity continued to resonate in her mind. Harper sat in her office, leafing through the trial notes. Each page reminded her of Malik's precise words, the relentless logic of his reasoning, and a maturity far beyond his years. She realized that underestimating someone because of their appearance or youth had nearly cost her credibility and control of her own courtroom. An idea then took root in her mind. Rather than viewing Malik as a young student to be monitored or corrected, she could learn from him. His talent was rare, and having confronted him directly had given her a valuable insight into what discipline and preparation can achieve. Harper summoned Malik to her office. When he entered, he greeted her politely and sat down in front of her, calm and attentive. "Young man," Harper began, his voice measured but filled with genuine respect, "I would like to congratulate you again on your performance at the hearing. You demonstrated a mastery of the law that few experienced lawyers possess." Malik gave a slight smile, acknowledging the judge's honesty. "Thank you, Your Honor. Your courtroom is demanding, but that's what makes the experience so rewarding." Harper leaned slightly forward. "I've been thinking about what happened, and I'd like to propose something to you. You have a rare talent, Malik. Rather than only opposing each other in court, I'd like you to consider the idea of collaborating with the court on certain complex cases. Your perspective and logic could be invaluable, not only to me, but to justice in general." Malik, surprised but honored, nodded. "It would be a privilege, Your Honor. I would be happy to help and continue learning under your supervision." For Harper, it was another step in her evolution. She had started the meeting intending to test Malik, but she left with profound admiration and a desire to change her perception of young talent. She had understood that respect and recognition are often more powerful than authority and arrogance. That day, the New Haven courtroom witnessed not only the victory of a young genius, but also the birth of a promising collaboration, founded on mutual respect, intelligence, and a passion for justice. Malik Jefferson had not only won a case, but he had also opened a new path for himself and for those who knew how to recognize genius when it appeared. A few weeks after the historic hearing, the New Haven courthouse had changed, but it wasn't just the architecture or the protocol that had evolved, it was the perception of talent and of justice itself. Judge Cynthia Harper now had a more open and respectful vision, and Malik Jefferson was beginning to establish himself as a prodigy recognized throughout the legal community. Harper and Malik now worked together on complex cases where precision and intellectual rigor were essential. Malik brought his fresh perspective, clarity, and relentless logic, while Harper offered his experience, knowledge of courtroom intricacies, and wisdom to guide the young lawyer. Together, they formed a formidable duo, capable of solving cases that many considered unsolvable. During a particularly important hearing, Harper found himself watching Malik with a mixture of pride and respect. Every argument he presented was impeccable, every legal reference perfectly mastered. The jurors, the lawyers, and even members of the public seemed captivated. Malik was no longer just the impressive young student, he had become a symbol of competence, rigor, and determination. After the hearing, Harper turned to him. "Malik, I must say, I have never seen such a brilliant mind at your age. You have not only earned the respect of everyone in this room, but you have also transformed my perception of what a young talent can achieve." Malik, with his usual calm, replied. "Thank you, Madam Justice. Your openness to recognizing talent and working together made all of this possible. The real victory is one of justice and mutual learning." News of Malik Jefferson's exceptional competence spread quickly throughout the legal community. Renowned lawyers, professors, and even judges came to meet him, eager to understand the method, discipline, and intelligence behind his successes. Malik, ever humble, continued to work tirelessly, proving that his genius lay not only in his knowledge but also in the respectful and ethical way he applied it. For Judge Harper, this collaboration was a personal and professional turning point. She had learned an invaluable lesson: talent and merit know no age, color, or experience. And for Malik, the New Haven courtroom was no longer just a place of confrontation, it was a space where genius could be expressed, recognized, and inspire the respect of all. On that day, in the heart of the legal community, a young black man had just proven that excellence, preparation, and integrity are forces capable of changing not only the course of a trial, but also the perception of those who believed themselves invincible. Malik Jefferson was not only a legal prodigy, he was now a role model, a source of inspiration, and living proof that genius and mutual respect can triumph over arrogance and prejudice.